And it's fingers crossed. Welcome to ADRAMADA as we experience yet another incredible day of bad weather. The weather has been great all day. I got up early, got the smoker out because today is National Barbecue Day, and I've had some ribs sitting in the fridge for a couple weeks that have been begging for attention. So they got done just in time. There was a little rain on the smoker, and it was throwing steam. It's always a pretty thing. And what is this? Okay, good. So, welcome to ADRAMADA. Another Dave Rush Ask Me Anything Digital Alchemy. We get together once a week on Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Central Time to talk tech. Come for the shirt. Stay for the news and the project. I know. Let me get the whole shirt up here for a second. I don't know how long if I can pull this off. I don't know where I ran across this shirt, but I got it within the last week or so. It's a whole bunch of different Klingons on there. I love Worf. I have built my own mythology around Worf. And we'll leave it at that for the moment. I'm not afraid to get into the topics. I would go down the rabbit hole and we would be doing this for anyways. Anyways, I am the aforementioned Dave Rush, the Commodore of ADRAMADA. You, therefore, are the ADRAMADA Armada, and I am so glad to have you here. What is this? There's the button for that. So we talk tech on this show. Anything that's interesting, anything that's fun, and it doesn't have to be computer tech. It often is, but, we range all over the place. We celebrate technology from electric cars to electric guitars and music and movies and the synergy of energy and booting to computing and Linux to ethics and the chase to space, all that stuff. I got more here. And the subject, it doesn't have to be tech. We'll tackle anything, religion, sex, and politics. Today, if you are not watching this live, you're catching it on the archive, is Thursday, May 16th. Noteworthy, there wasn't a lot of really awesome events in the news on this date, but I did note two of them because one of them actually just came up in a conversation I had earlier this week or late last week. In 1876, pharmacist Charles E. Hires, think about it, presents Hires root beer at the Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia. He was, like Dr. Pepper, trying to create something medicinal, and it didn't work out to be that effective, but it was delicious. The reason this came up in conversation the other day, sorry, hot tea, is because as the soda wars go, it got bought and it got bought and it got bought. I think Dr. Pepper was the last owner, and they killed the product in the last 1 to 2 years. So we were wondering where to find Hires, and the answer is in the surplus bins if you're brave enough to drink it. The other, on this day in history, it's not the greatest event, but it's a fun story. If you haven't seen the documentary on this, in 1943, Operation Chastise, the 617th RAF Squadron begins the famous Dam Busters raid, bombing Moan and Eder dams in the Ruhr Valley with bouncing bombs, right? At just the right altitude and just the right speed, and let these barrel bombs go, and they would skip across down the rivers until they about ran out of momentum, and then just before the dam, they would sink, and as they got to an appropriate level, kaboom, and they blew the dams up, and it's an amazing story. So, eep, op, orc, right? ADRAMADA has a Discord home. We would love, if you are not already a member, for you to join us. The link is in the chat feed. You can contact me there. I'm on all the time. If you don't want to contact me there, but you do for some bizarre reason want to contact me, there's a couple of email addresses, and I now have an X account. I won't call it by its other name. They want to change the name, then I'm going to use the new name. So there's my X account, and here is my absolutely dead, but a lot of fun to operate Mastodon account. All right. Ways to talk to Dave. Let's see what we can do here. Don't do that. That would be a bad thing. But let's do this. All right. So last week, we'll do a quick review here. We looked at Umbrel OS, a true home server designed to operate as a home-centered hub for home-type IT services such as IoT and AV streaming and crypto operations if you do that from your house, password vaults. It's not user app focused. It's a server. And interestingly, a day or two after we did the show last week, I got a message from our old good friend Abu Bakr Al-Hajj, who says he's been using Umbrel OS for years. I think he said 4 years. I didn't think it was that old, but sure, why not? And that's for hosting his Bitcoin ventures. And then, so you got to click on this if you want to advance the slide. This week, we're going to explore Git. I had this idea about what I was going to do and how I was going to do, and then as I got into it, I realized the idea lacks merit, and I have to do it another way. So we're going to do this as a two-parter. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about what it is and what it does, and then we will, in the next episode, use it. Today, we're going to install a copy of it. There's a lot of Git product out there. We'll be using a product called Gitea, all one word, Gitea, which is Git with a cup of tea. We'll talk about what that is and what some of the alternatives are and so forth. Some of you follow me on multiple social media, and I try not to cross-post on different platforms. I do if there's something particularly interesting or I think is interesting. But you may have noticed I posted on X a question today because of an email that I got today. And I get a weekly email from Kickstarter. Here's our favorites of the week. And I've noticed over the last 6 months that their favorites of the week are horrible. I'm sure they're wonderful in the eyes of their developers and probably for certain supporters, but it's all the same. It's fund my graphic novel, fund my book. Sure, it's not all that, but there is a serious dearth of technical products coming out. It's not totally dead. I bought one, that one. I bought one recently. I bought an awesome shell for a Pi Zero W. Yeah. That basically turns it into a Pi 3 as far as putting all the connectors on the outside and things like that. And I love supporting products, and I love being able to get in on them early and get them inexpensively if I'm interested. But, if you go look for Raspberry Pi based projects right now on Kickstarter, nothing. Just nothing. So I'm wondering if is tech kickstarting on its way out? Oh, I got slides over here. Let's go back to the slideshow for a sec. I hope you had a great time with the Aurora Borealis this past weekend. I'm not going to get into it as a show topic, but I will show you 4 pictures. I did not get to see it live and in person. I did not make it as far down south as I am here in Houston. But this particular image that you're seeing now is over my hometown in northern Ohio on the southern shores of Lake Erie. This water tower, that's the Vermilion Water Tower, and down below is the Vermilion River. So somebody from up north sent a picture to a friend of mine down here in the south, and that friend sent this one to me, so that was cool. Then another buddy of mine, this is where I was supposed to go and watch it, and we decided to stay here. Foolish. Oh, sorry, that was it. That was for the eclipse. This is a buddy who is also in northern Ohio, and this is from the scout camp that I effectively grew up in and I worked in for many years and supported. So he goes up there all the time and still a big supporter of scouting. And this was the stuff over that. Okay, well, let's see who's here and what you guys are talking about and whatnot. Shia Moonstone. I was so wrong about you. I saw you on one of the other platforms. I thought you and somebody else on here were two different people. You are not. I have finally learned that you are the same person, so I know who you are. And I'm so dumb. The pink hands should have been the giveaway, right? Because your avatar. That's as far as I'll go on that. What else we got here? By the way, Shia was in at 8:43 a.m. my time, right after I posted the show. And then Tullowit pops in about an hour before showtime. I was in on and off for an hour before showtime, trying to make sure things are running. And Jason Helms, we are honoring your request. Mods from the Discord server. If you didn't see that, please go check out the mod channel of the Bat Cave, and we can offer some assistance to Jason. Yeah, I like this shirt. I just came up with it the other day, and it's very cool. I love the story of Worf. Not just my mythology that I built around it, but, and maybe I mentioned this the other day because I think I had this conversation with somebody, and it was probably you, but look at Worf, right? Worf goes to Kronos because they think Gowron is a changeling. And he gets into an honor to the death fight with Gowron. But the fight gets stopped. So we had a chance there to kill Gowron. And Gowron finishes up the scene with, "It's too bad you didn't kill me now, Worf. Next time." Okay, get the idea. And then later, toward the end of the Deep Space Nine, he kills Gowron and becomes, for a moment, for a minute and a half, the Chancellor, which that doesn't make sense, right? You don't ascend to the Chancellery by killing the Chancellor, because otherwise, Duras he assassinated the predecessor. Name escapes me. But that's got to be approved by the council. You can't just kill him and say, "I'm Chancellor now." So he dumps it off. I think I did mention this to you the other day. Did you get the idea? Not tech kickstarting is still especially useful for startups without much capital. Maybe. But again, there's just not as many out there. I could go on there, beginning of the COVID quarantines, and there was 30 or 40 Raspberry Pi projects. Now there's literally zero. Just got back from a work event. Great. And I hope, Patricia Grace, that your donation meeting went well the other day. No worries. I'm late. Kylie Powder, I saw you post a response on LinkedIn. So good to see you. Thank you. Yeah, you bet, buddy. All right, well, back to notes here. Useless trivia. Listening to a podcast or something like that, somebody said something, and I had to look it up, and it turned out what they said wasn't fully accurate, but it was pretty close. Did you know in the U.S. that the federal government puts a cap on the rate that gas pumps can pump? And it's a different rate for not diesel necessarily, but for the diesel that's designed to fill 18-wheelers and large vehicles. The consumer version for cars has this same cap that gasoline does. And it's a maximum of 10 gallons per minute. Most, apparently, gas stations run between 6 and 8. So, why? Well, they say by capping the flow rate at 10, gas station pumps help minimize the risk of accidents and ensure that the fuel is dispensed safely. Basically, what their problem is the higher the flow of fuel going through there, the greater the static electric discharge buildup is. So by slowing it down, there's less chance, they say, of sparks. These limits are different in other countries based on their own safety standards and guidelines. I lived for several years in a country where it was a fire hose, but you had to very carefully modulate the handle. Here is a Libre writer tip. I know I'm not the only Libre writer on right now as we speak. I kind of learned this a while back, and it dawned on me that this would be a cool shared tip. So I lost my notes here. If you go into Libre Writer and pick any document that you have open, doesn't matter, and set the author field for that document, it will be remembered in Libre Writer for all subsequent documents that you create. When you do that, a cool side benefit happens. And that is if you're working on a document, and let's say, I don't know, it's a 50-page document, and the last thing you did was work on page 25, and then you closed it. When you open it up again next time, you will pick up on page 25 where you left off editing. That's a pretty cool thing. Okay, I'm going to do this story. This was in the news all over the place last week, so I'm not going to get into real depth. Here's the short version. A wild orangutan was observed applying a plant with known medicinal properties to a wound. The first time this was ever observed in a wild animal. The American Medical Association responded immediately by filing suit to prevent orangutanists from practicing medicine without a license. Thank you. I wrote that. What do we got here? Okay. This is a cool little bit of trivia. It's tech trivia. Thank you for the hearts. Until last year, you may have heard this. You may have been involved in a conversation, but there was no technical underpinnings to prove it. It was speculated. And that is, researchers were unable to determine the age of given cells in the human body. There was always kind of an estimate that they said most cells last, give or take, 7 years. But in 2023, a Swedish team from the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, led by announced that cells can be dated by applying carbon-14 dating techniques to DNA. And let's cut to the chase here. Most cells in the body are under 10 years old, with the average run that they've measured, average running 7 to 10 years. They haven't measured them for all of the systems of the body, some organs they haven't gotten to yet, things like that. Some only live as long as 5 days, like cells on the lining of the gut. Skeletal cells run a little over a decade. Different muscles have yet to be measured, but the muscle wall over the ribs, those are long-lasting cells at 15 years. This one surprised me. I thought brain cells were effectively immortal until they die. So I figured, once the time a brain has reached maturity and full size, that every cell in the brain doesn't get replaced. It just lives until it dies, and eventually, you shrink and get dumber and whatever. Well, turns out they are replaced every 7 to 10 years, or they live every 7 to 10 years, or 7 to 10. And heart cells have yet to be measured. All right, what do you guys say in here, Patricia Grace? I think carbon dating assumes a steady rate of release. Yes, it does. All right, let's do the actual tech news of the day, shall we? Researchers, anything good, and as you know, I fall into the camp that does not consider the current generation of AI to be good. But a lot of other people do, so fine. But anything good is bound to be abused and compromised. And then the work begins, or it began from the beginning, but it's never enough to protect it from those kinds of abuses and compromises. Well, without going any more than the headline and the slide that I have up here, researchers uncovered an LLM, large language module jacking scheme to target cloud-hosted AI models. So, of course, it has vulnerabilities. It's relatively new. There's going to be all kinds of vulnerabilities that are encountered, and I read about it. It's complicated, it's ugly, it's evil, and it's not worth our time sharing that. You can look that up, but all one word, LLM jacking, if you are curious in pursuing that further. In the year 1587, you probably remember that. The second effort to establish a long-term colony of settlers from England in the New World was attempted. 115 English settlers landed on what became known as Roanoke Island under the direction of Sir Walter Raleigh, who later invented cigarettes. Raleigh's. That's half true. The leader of the colony was a man named John White. White returned to England to gather support for the colony. Money, food, more settlers, and so forth. He left his family in Roanoke, including his daughter, young daughter, who was the first English child born in America. When he returned, you got to know this one, right? If you're an American, this is like a major part of American history. The Roanoke colony was deserted, largely destroyed, and few clues were left. The word Croatan was carved two places, once into a palisade, and the letters CRO were found carved into a nearby tree. So this very famous etching is not historically accurate. The word Croatan was not in a tree, just CRO. Croatan was carved elsewhere. Anyways, Croatan may have referred to an island 50 miles to the south. And so the first conclusion that researchers and historians leap to is, oh, okay, they had to abandon the colony for some reason, and they determined to head south to Croatan. Croatoan. Yeah. However, no one was ever found. It is the lost colony of Roanoke. So they've been working on this since 1587. Where did everybody go? And of course, like all science, every time they come up with settled science, somebody changes it a little later. But some new archaeology this past summer has advanced the research. They excavated and found a mix of English and Algonquin artifacts, including Algonquin jewelry that was made from copper that could only have come from the settlers. So make of that what you will. It's just an interesting little news blurb to me, a little tech news blurb that says, hey, research continues. Are they ever going to find it? Yeah, who knows? Maybe they'll uncrate excavate something and find 115 sets of bones. I don't know. But work continues. The UK Space Agency has awarded the University of Surrey £250,000. They don't say pounds of what? Rice? To develop an extremely low orbit. Right? So we're not talking about basic low Earth orbit. We're talking about extremely low Earth orbit where they are actually in upper atmosphere. So these guys are taking that money to develop a new propulsion system that captures air in the upper atmosphere and convert it to fuel. And so if that succeeds, a newly designed thruster may keep satellites aloft for years using only solar power and this captured fuel. I protest. I think they're taking all of our atmosphere and using it to pump around the little side, and we should protest. Some interesting research out of Arabia, where I lived for a couple of years, 12 years ago or so. Up in northern Arabia, there are ancient lava tubes and lava tube caves, and researchers have been digging around and found a huge layered variety of civilizations that have inhabited those caves, aging from between 3,500 years ago and 10,000 years ago. We're talking about Neolithics back in 10,000 years. As we got up into the 3,500s, the Chalcolithics. I know you're wondering what a Chalcolithic is. Hold that thought. And then True Bronze Age. The Chalcolithic era was where civilizations were beginning and increasing to use smelted copper. They found cave art showing plants and animals and livestock that found very surprising there. They found drawings to indicate that there was oasis-based farming, Bronze Age artifacts, and lots of bones. Last news article of the day. Well, they did it. Raspberry Pi has released their official M.2 hat. I purchased a third-party one. There are other third-party ones out there than the ones I bought. The good news about this official one, besides the fact that it's official, is the price. It's $12 US. I spent a lot more than that on the one that I bought. Bad news. Let me reach down here and get something. You can't tell very well by the picture, but it only supports two sizes of SSDs, of M.2 SSDs. This is an M42. I'm sorry, this is a 2242. That means it's 22 millimeters wide. Most M2 and this style of SATA drives, NGFF format they're called, are 20 millimeters wide, 22. And then they come in all kinds of lengths, 20, 30, 42, 60, and 80. 60 and 80 are very popular in desktops and many laptops, not all of them. But those things won't support the 60s and 80s. They only support 30s and 42s. So it's not universally loved. There's a lot of people who got hold of the early ones, and their reviews have gone out in the last couple of days. There's some quality control issues. Like me, there is universal, almost universal, disdain for the fact that you can't put 60 and 80 millimeter units in there. Unfortunate, but we'll see where it goes. Maybe they'll get that improved. All right, did I have another slide? Nah. All right, that's all the news that's fit to print, and we are right on the half hour, which is the perfect time to check. Oh, okay, well, the weather here is clearing up. It's around Houston. It's still a real mess, but at least over top of my home, looks like we will get through the show. So cool. I have been smoking ribs all day. It's National Barbecue Day. I posted some pictures on various platforms. And I ate a half a rack before the show, and they were wonderful. What else? I got... Yesterday I did a Craigslist deal for this. Can you see it? Kind of, sort of. This is a traditional 2.5-inch form factor drive, but it's an SSD, 2 terabytes. And I've installed that in my latest NUC, Intel NUC, that little... Do I have an Intel NUC down here? Yeah, I did. So there's my latest Intel NUC. This is a 11th generation, so it's a few years back, but it's do what I want to do. I don't want to use... I don't use my laptop when I DJ. This is what I use, and I usually have an external 4 terabyte drive for all my music, but I want that to be a backup, and so the new 2 terabyte drive will be the internal in here. There's also a half terabyte M2 NVMe drive, so that's the operating system and applications and things like that. So that new drive is just to hold music. All right, that's everything out of the pile down there. Last week and this week, this is just personal ranty stuff. I went to the Texas equivalent of, in what is many states, is the Department of Motor Vehicles. 4 trips. Every time I'd go, oh, well, you don't have this. I was very nice. I knew, look, I know, you all know, you go to DMV, it's not a pleasant experience. So if you go in advance and say, I know that this isn't going to be a pleasant experience, but I'm going to put my best foot forward, I'm going to be polite, I'm going to be nice, and maybe they'll treat me nice, and maybe they'll even throw me a bone. Yeah, well, I had no long lines. I must say that the place we go here is practically secret. So for all those 4 trips, I never waited more than 10 minutes. And it's a seat. You go up, you get a number, and then you take a seat in the gallery, and you wait for your number to be called, like the old butcher shops. So after 4 trips, we've had to get some new cars. And so they are all done. Okay. The other night, I knew this was going to happen sooner or later. My monitor, sitting right here in front of me, has been winking out just for a couple seconds. Just go black. And then it would come right back. Sometimes it would go longer and longer and longer. And finally, it bit the dust. Woke up my machine from its sleep. It came up and it winked to black. And it would not come back to save its life. So it was late that night. That's what tomorrow. So the next day, I break out a monitor that I've got in the closet, ready as a replacement, and things aren't going well. You know, how tough is it, right? Unplug the old monitor, plug in the new monitor, and off you go. Turned out, at exactly that same time, the battery in my wireless keyboard failed. And that mix of symptoms was very confusing. Got to figure it out. All right, that's all the news. It's fit to print. We are ready to talk project. Let's catch up everybody here. It doesn't count for events, we'll say. Doesn't account for events, one events, we'll say. Okay. Like worldwide floods. Oh, the ribs are good. The ribs are good. Sure, everybody hates going to DMV. Ugh. And yeah, I know the state you're in, Shineline Stone. It's pretty nasty up there. You were lucky at the DMV for years. I knew a person there who would walk me through. Nice. Nice. You're next. Way to go. That helps. All right. Well, let's talk about Git. I don't have slides for Git. We're going to do some stuff with Putty. I'll share that. And then we're going to do some stuff with the website. We'll do that. So right now, we're just going to talk for a couple of minutes here, what it is, and go from there. So what it is. Git is a protocol. It's a version control protocol. It takes an application to take advantage of that protocol. And in short, the nature of this protocol is to take snapshots of changes in documents. And it's not like Word or any other word processor that periodically takes snapshots. There's a document out there, or maybe you made a brand spanking new one, doesn't matter. And you edit it, and when you feel like you're done editing, you send it to the Git service protocol, and he says, okay, I will take a snapshot of that as you have edited. And I'm not going to delete anything else that's ever been submitted under the name of that document. So you can do that hundreds or thousands of times. And the nice thing about it is, like virtual machine snapshots, you can go back and get any one of them. At some point, I don't want a bunch of edited documents. I want a final release document. So somebody in charge of the documentation process, if this is a collaborative effort, or you might look at and say, okay, I am absolutely satisfied that if I were going to share this, if I were going to use this code, this document, this script, whatever, that this is, for the moment, the release version, then you can set that. You merge that into the final release. Git is also used, and this is where, if you are not a developer, your probably first exposure to Git comes from. It's used as a distribution service. So, for instance, I've created an application, and maybe you can use the application in their native files, or maybe those files have to be manipulated after they get onto your machine. Don't know, don't care. But what we're going to do is, I need you as an installer who wants to install the application I've created to get a copy of all of the files and directories and subdirectories that I've created here and get them down to your local machine so that you can either compile them or so that they're ready to rock and roll. And so you'll open up a command line. You can do this in Windows. You can do this in Mac. You can certainly do this in Linux. We run a command called git clone, and you specify the repository where you want to get these things, and it will download an exact duplicate of all of the files and file structure in that registry. And then you follow the rest of the instructions that you're given on what to do with those duplicated. That's also a really cool way for you as a potential developer to say, hey, I want to work on some of this stuff. So I'll start by git cloning all the stuff, and then I'll pick a document or some code or a file that I want to work on. I'll do that, and then you can submit that back up, and at some point it will get reviewed, and maybe your changes will be incorporated. Maybe they won't. That depends on what you've done in your relationship with the maintainer of the Git. But again, the whole point of all of this is, even if I make this my release document, it might have a problem, and I've got to go back. That's okay. We can do that. That's what Git versioning control does. So who needs Git? Developers do. Administrators do. Users do, just installing some applications. Also, students pursuing various certifications need a basic understanding of Git. You need it for Linux Plus, you need it for the 2 LPIs, you need it for Red Hat certification. There's a lot of Git offerings out there, and here's, I guess, some of the most recognizable ones. The one that everybody knows is the one that's owned and operated by Microsoft, GitHub. They bought it a couple of years ago. It was kind of independent. Everybody was worried and nervous about what Microsoft would do to it, and they're making some changes, and some of them aren't all that onerous, but they're not all that pleasant. There are other web and cloud-based GitHub products that are also installable as local versions. Gitlab has historically been the most complete, the most sophisticated, and for a lot of people, the most overkill application out there. Its big competitor, Gitea, the one we're going to play with today, is scaled back a little bit from Gitlab. And the next one in popularity is Bitbucket. Gitea and Gitlab both have free versions, premium versions. The free version is freemium. But for most people, absolutely sufficient to do the kinds of projects that devs are doing. Just to mention a couple other names of products out there, GOGS, G-O-G-S, GitHub Enterprise Edition, GitLab, it's not Consumer Edition, Community Edition, and GitLab Enterprise Edition. Bitbucket doesn't have two divisions. Road Code has both Community Editions and Enterprise Editions. GitLab and Gitea self-hosted on local machines in a cloud on a virtual private server. And there's a marvelous little comparison page. And this is maintained by the folks at Gitea. So take it with a certain grain of salt. But I will put this here right now in the chat feed. It's kind of a cool thing. Let's see. This I read and copied up a quote from the maintainer of Gitea, but it turned out to be 5 years old and it was out of date, so I'm going to let that go. Gitea narrow focus. Okay, because of the narrow focus of Gitea, very low resource usage. It doesn't use much CPU. It doesn't use much space in and of itself. It doesn't use much RAM. In fact, you can install this on a Raspberry Pi 2, right, with its 1.1 or 1.4 gigahertz single core CPU. The space, that depends on what you're doing, right? How much document space and snapshots and things like that you're going to use. Gitea, to take its snapshots, uses a MySQL server and saves them as records. So when we go to install in a couple of minutes, Gitea, the first step is to install a SQL server. We'll install the MySQL clone MariaDB. We've done that in other projects. You would think I could spell differentiator. I did spell it right. It's not in the library. Okay, so that's today's project. We're going to install Gitea. You can run this on, as I said, RPi 2. You can run it on a Windows machine. You can run it on a Mac machine. The biggest deal is you got to have enough space to accommodate the documents, the code, the files that you're going to do. I have a tutorial here that I started with. Turns out that it's a little dated. It's not too far off that it's impossible to figure out, but I'm going to put it here, and then I'm going to show you how to do it, my steps, which again is their steps, and then I'm going to address the issues that they're a little behind on. Just checking notes here. All right, so that installation tutorial is from Pi My Life Up. They're okay sometimes. I've used their projects in the past before and borrowed them, and we've done them here together. So I'm just going to do it so you know what to expect. And we're going to do this live in real time. If you're going to do this on a Raspberry, as I am, I'm doing this on a Raspberry 4, but again, it'll work fine on a 2 with a gig of RAM. I'm doing it with bigger and more. Do a decent size micro SD card. I don't play around anymore with anything under 32 gigs. I think this has 64 gigs in it, but that's beyond insane overkill for a demo. You can use Raspberry Pi operating system, Raspberry OS. You can use Ubuntu for Raspberry or a lot of other ones. I'm using Ubuntu on here because I've had Ubuntu running on this Pi for, I don't know, 6 weeks or so. I'm enjoying it. So what files need version control? Well, code files, of course. Dependencies, config files, documentation, scripts. In theory, it can work with anything, but they are optimized to work with certain types of code packages. That's really what it's about. But again, you can modify it. The whole magic of this process is the protocol and commands enable multiple collaborative developers, doesn't necessarily mean coders, and writers to simultaneously make local edits and then send them up to the Git for review and merging where appropriate. All right, let's dive right into it here. Oh, once you have a Git up and running and you want to access it, you use a Git client, usually from the command line, and you use the command Git followed by a subcommand, Git clone, Git push, Git pull, Git fetch. And so I'm going to give you this link right now, just so you can look up all of the subcommands if you're interested, just as a speed review of what they are. We're going to do all those on the next Git episode, but it might be neat to look it over first. All right, so we're going to install this. I have Ubuntu installed on a Raspberry sitting here. I installed it this afternoon and updated it. It's otherwise dead fresh. So let us head on over there. What do I need? Man, I don't need that. Putty. And this. And that. And that. Okay. So I've got this Ubuntu Raspberry Pi up and running. I've SSH'd into it. You can do this from the terminal directly on it. And we've done a sudo apt update and a sudo apt upgrade. So it's all current and fresh. We'll start by installing a database server, a MySQL clone. We use sudo apt install git. If it's not already installed, that'll install the Git client and the MariaDB server. And I don't want to be prompted with, are you really going to do this? I'll say -y, and it'll do it. This is a quick install. Prove it. What is the password for this? It is Raspberry. RASPBERRY. Okay, buzz, grind. This is almost the longest of the installs that we're going to do. In fact, it is the longest. I have another long install coming up in a couple of minutes. It takes 20 seconds. Once that's done, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create an account on this Ubuntu machine, on this host, that's going to be the operator, the owner of the MariaDB database server. And the name of that account is going to be Gitea with a capital G, Gitea. Just trying to vamp while it finishes up here. This should all finish in total in about a minute. Buzz, grind, dragging along. So we're going to be using the sudo add user command, And we're going to make sure that it creates a home directory for this user with a flag on it that's --geckos. It's also going to add the user to a group, there we go, all done, called Git. So let's look at this here. I'm going to add user. Nobody can use this user account that we're going to make to log into this server. It's going to be an internal user process. This Geckos is going to create an environment, including home directories. Here's the name of the account we're going to make, and this is a group that we're going to make it a member of. So we hit the enter key, bam, done. Okay, and you can see here, he made a home directory called home git and made him a member above that with the group git. All right, now, if I were just doing this as a home demo, I wouldn't do the following thing, but we're going to set everybody up here. So we're now going to add the security features to the SQL Server database. We say sudo MySQL secure installation. It's all one special command. And so we're going to set a password for root. Now that's not the root account of the Raspberry Pi. It's the root account of the Maria database server. And I am setting it to something I wouldn't do in the real world. Raspberry. R-A-S-P-B-E-R-R-Y. Setting the root password you're using. Sockets that you already have a root account record. You can safely answer, do I want to switch to unit socket authentication? No, I do not. I don't want to change the root password. You confirm the heroes of I've allowed remote. Set the root password. Yes, I've allowed remote root login. No, I don't want to change that password. And so here's the problem. There are questions that are being asked here that are not in that Pi My Life Up tutorial. It's a little outdated for here. So do I want to remove anonymous users? Yeah, if I truly want to make this secure, yes, I do. Should I disallow root login from remote? In the real world, yes. I don't want somebody from the outside world logging in remotely and managing my SQL Server. However, I won't be able to share with you if I do that. So I'm not going to disallow root login remotely. I'm going to allow it. So I'll say no. It's a double negative there. Should I remove the test database and access to it? Yes, the test database is just for learning, and we're not learning databases here, so yeah, get rid of it. I can just hit the enter key because we have a capital Y, which means that's the default answer. And all right, you've made some security changes. Do you want to make those changes happen? Yes, I do. I can hit yes or just the enter key. All right. The database is now secure, at least as secure as that goes. The database engine. Now we got to make a server. So I'm going to start by logging into it with sudo MySQL, login as user root, and I'm in. I don't know how well you can tell this, but the text is lighter. This is no longer an Ubuntu Pi prompt. This is a MariaDB prompt. So now we're going to make a new database for our Git server. Create database. It's called Gitea. And in SQL services, almost all commands end with a semicolon. Bam. Done. And now we're going to give all power to the Gitea account. And this is where we set the password for the user who is going to access that account. So it's Raspberry. If you go follow that Pi My Life Up, it's going to say something about enter name here or some bunch of all caps word. And you've got to change that to a password. So I'm setting a password here. for the Gitea account on this database. Bam, done. And now whenever you make a change to security in a SQL database, you have to get rid of all of the current security settings which are in memory, and that will cause it to read the new ones from the configuration file and put them in memory. So we flush privileges, done. The database is made, an account to use it is made. We are set with the database. Now it's time to play with Git. How are we doing on time here? 55. I can do this. So the first thing they want us to do is to use sudo and log in as the Git account. Okay, sudo su git. I can do that. And now we got to send Git to his home folder. So we cd tilde, and we're going to make a directory in there called Gitea. You can make it anything that you want, but it's a lot easier to follow their instructions. So we make a directory called Gitea, and then we're going to cd into Gitea. And now we're going to use the wget command to go get all of the Gitea application files. This takes 20 seconds. About. And then the last thing we're going to do is there's a file in here called Gitea. It's the launch program. And so we've got to make it executable. So I'm going to do a chmod, make it executable, the Gitea file. I'm done with that. I don't need to be logged in as the Git account anymore. So I'm going to exit. Now I'm just regular good old DRushTX again. Last thing to install it is we have to create a configuration file. We're going to use nano because we're following their instructions. I would use vim, but so be it. Sudo nano, and we're going to put this, create a file called gitea.service and put it in the etc systemd system folder. Okay, there we go. And then if you use the tutorial, it's got a bunch of lines for you to copy and paste into here. And so I have done exactly that. It starts with unit and it ends with home git. Oops. Doesn't end with home git. A couple of things after that. Okay, there we go. And we save and exit. Control X, yes, enter. All right, there's now a file called gitea.service. And the reason that we created that is so that we can define a running service in here that we will be able to use and operate every time this system starts up. So it takes two commands to do that. One, we enable it using the system control command. We're almost done here. So we're going to sudo system control enable that service. And that says, okay, every time this computer boots up, I will run the Gitea service on here. And now let's make it run right now. I could do that by rebooting it, or I can say sudo system control start that service. Hey, Gitea is up and running. I'm done with this. I'm done with the command line. For managing this service, we need a web browser. Stick with me for another 3 minutes and we'll be done here. So let me get out of that, go back to you, image slideshow. No, I don't want a slideshow, I want my shining head. All right, now I'm going to open up a browser. You can do this on any computer. You could do it on the machine that you just did. You could do it on any other machine here in your local network. You could be insane and open up a port and access it remotely from the outside. And sometimes there might even be an argument for that. Let me get the thing I want. There we go. So what I'm doing, I'll share this with you in a second. I've opened up a browser tab, and I'm going to either the IP address of my host that I've been working on, or if it's got a domain name, mine does, it's ubuntupi.local. And it's running in a web browser that was installed in all this process on port 3000. So let's share that with you. You know how much fun I have with getting these things to share. All right, that looks good. All right, I know this isn't stunningly visible, but there's a couple things that we've got to make some changes to here, and there's just a few here. So all this stuff is filled in here. Hosts starts with 127.0.0.1. We can leave it like that for now, but first of all, I'm going to say we'll be logging into this server using the Gitea account. So I've got to use that Raspberry password, RASPBERRY. The name of the database is Gitea. That's cool. Going to run it under this username. Okay, so here's what we've got to change. We've got to change the server domain to whatever domain name you're using in here. Mine isn't localhost, it's local. We wanted to listen on port 3000, and the URL. The login instructions say don't use localhost. They want us to use the IP address. I don't like that because if you're using DHCP, it could change. So, but my domain name isn't going to change. So it's ubuntu pi.local :3000. Got a log file. Don't have to do any of these optional settings. So basically, we put in a password. We changed the server domain, and we put in the URL address, and we're done. Now, what the instructions say are going to happen is when we hit install Gitea, it's going to take you to a login page. When I've done this in the past, I get an error, and they say this takes a really long time in those instructions. For me, it takes seconds. So I'm going to hit install Gitea. And it's happening, and it's happening, and the world waits. And if it takes us to a login page, cool. We will not log in because we can't. We haven't created a user account to operate. Hey, this one isn't going to gag on me. Yes, it goes. Okay, there was the failure. Just what I expected. So I'll show you what I want now. So now I'm going to go back to the exact same page. I won't get an installation screen this time, because it's already been installed. Should wind up in a login page. ubuntupi.local 3000. I may not have waited long enough. Well, at any rate, what's going to happen... Oh, here, let me show you something really cool. How about this? I'm going to take you to a page that looks just like what you're going to see. Gitea.com. A lot has changed in the last day. Cloud. All right, let's go find here the notes. Well, at any rate, what's going to happen is you're going to wind up on a login page, and no matter what account you try to use, it's going to fail, but there's an option down there. There we go. Okay, it was still catching up here. So I'm going to hit sign in, and there's no valid user account or password that you can use. So we're going to need an account, register now? Yes. So we'll give it a username. How about Gitea user 01? Any email address that makes you happy here? Set a password for this account. I'll use Raspberry, R-A-S-P-B-E-R-R-Y, R-A-S-P-B-E-R-R-Y. The account is registered, and this is what managing our Gitea repository looks like. We could start by creating an organization that will own one or more repositories. Then we can go and create repositories and associate them with organizations. That's what I'm going to do next week, or next episode that we talk about this. So that, folks, is how to install a Gitea repository control hub on a Raspberry Pi. The steps are pretty much the same if you're going to do this on any flavor of Linux, on an x86 machine or a Mac machine or even a Windows machine. It's all pretty simple. Let me check in with you guys, see what all you're doing here, and then we'll get ready and wind things up. Apologies for the late run. All right, what's going on here? Or Rutgers in. Okay, catching up. There we go. Kindly Powder, thank you. This was a great intro to Git. Never knew what Git was or did before, so it's useful. Excellent. Yeah, you said you were going to get into it. So we will get into it. We'll use it next week. It's going to be a lot of fun next week or the week after. Checking in with each other here. Good job hunt. Enjoy the show as always. Patricia, very good. All right. Well, that gets everyone caught up. Let me do this. And then I will close the door. Shut the front door. Hey, as ever and always, thanks for coming. Thanks for joining the show. You got I'm putting invites out for some really cool things. I'm not getting much in the way of response, but if and when I do, I've got some really, really cool things going on here. Until then, let's close things up. I wish you, as ever and always, a great rest of the week. Please take care of each other. Take serious steps to stay healthy, and if at all possible, call or visit your parents. And never forget, technology is great, but the greatest resource we have are you and I. And with that, I bid you good night. I'll see you on ADRAMADA next Thursday and on the other platforms that I'm on. Until then, remember, how you do anything is how you do everything. Eep, op, ork, ah, ah.